Well, there are ways of doing that. There are ways of short-circuiting colds. Um, we we use a lot of sort of natural remedies. Echinacea and golden seal are a real good one. For it's a natural remedy. It's for it won't stop a cold, but what it will do is it will um, shorten the course of the illness. It will make it a lot milder and a lot faster to get over it. Echinacea is common. A combination of echinacea and golden seal are available at a lot of health food stores. Um, it's like a vitamin type pill. It's just a fairly small pill that you take a few times. There's another product that we will use that helps with shortening the course of a flu, and that is something called oscillococcinum. And it you can get those at, again, at health food stores. I don't know about here in Fort Collins. I haven't seen so much of this, but the King Soopers at 29th and 287 in Loveland has a broad range of homeopathic, naturopathic, and other types of products that I don't see it here in Fort Collins, or even in the King Super in South Loveland. So I guess it all depends on the audience that you're dealing with. But the King Super at that location, the North Loveland location, has a lot of those. But you're not very far from Natural Grocers, which used to be called Vitamin Cottage here. Sprouts has a lot of them as well. The nearest Sprouts I know of here, yeah, the nearest one to this location, however, is at Drake and LeMay. There's another one that's probably the same distance that's down at it's just past Timberline, in that big shopping area there. I just tried Corbett or something like that. Anyway, there's one there as well. You can get them there, but to the school, the closest location. But they seem to help by, in some manner, stimulating the immune system. Okay. And remember that in general, colds are self-limiting. Flus are much, much worse. And flus can actually carry you off. Colds rarely are bad enough. You usually have to get something secondary to a cold in order to really get in a situation that is life-threatening. But we use a lot of those. But then, I also try to avoid drugs as much as possible. Natural products have gotten kind of a bad rap in recent years, partially because some of the manufacturers have been pretty sloppy in their manufacturing procedures. I'll just call it that. Because they try to cut corners. Sometimes you can't even find it. It used to be that you couldn't even find the product in it. There's been an effort by the pharmaceutical industry to get it all shut down, which has not gone well for the pharmaceutical industry because people suspect their motives. There are a lot of doctors that will criticize the use of these things. And of course, like anything else, they're welcome to their opinion, but people's experience with them has generally been okay. The issue is that if you take these things and get worse, you should see a doctor. Because they're not helping. And quite frankly, for things like cold and the flu, there's very little we can do anyway. So, you know, you just want to be, what you want to do is try to keep your immune system in good shape, which can be a challenge. It means looking at diet. It means looking at lifestyle. But we've talked about that in the idea of functional medicine. Anyway, diet, exercise, meditation, and sleep are the four pillars of functional medicine. And then if those don't work, yes, you should see someone else. You should see a healthcare professional. One of the biggest problems we have is people denying that they actually have a problem. And we're all guilty of that, myself included. And which doesn't mean that we ought to be hypochondriacs, because that's the other side of that coin, is people hear about an illness and suddenly they have it or think they do. That was one of the banes of the medical programs that we used to see on television when I was a lot younger. The doctors referred to it as the disease of the week. And so these medical programs would have some weird disease, and all of a sudden you'd have everybody and his brother have it. When it would be something that might afflict 1 in 10,000 people. And we have people in our family who are just absolute hypochondriacs. They get a cut finger and they have to go to the emergency room. Or every little ache and pain is magnified out of proportion to its reality. So, anyway, any questions from last week? Okay, Glennis, are you going to be ready to make your presentations today? Okay. Okay. Well, we'll start doing that. I think I see Sarai coming in right now. So we will get started on that. What we're going to do today is your presentations. And we will, after that, we will talk about the last few topics. Good morning, Sarai. Welcome. Glad you could make it. As I was saying, we're going to do some presentations. Cheyenne and Glennis just got here a few minutes ago, so everybody was late today. We're going to do some presentations, and then we're going to talk about a couple of things: the endocrine system, the GI system, and to a lesser extent, the reproductive system, mainly focusing on how we treat disorders of these systems. Toward the end of class, I'd like to leave some time for you to catch up on assignments that you're behind on, so we can get all these things done. Presentations that we don't get to today, we'll do on Wednesday before the final. We do have a final on Wednesday, final assessment. The final assessment will, of course, cover everything that we've gone over in class. We will do that here in class, and then you'll be presumably done with the work you have to do. We have, of course, as usual, this week we do not have a discussion. So if you still have to post in the discussions, please do. Don't forget that the quizzes that we've had throughout the mod, you do have multiple opportunities to do them. So you can go back and improve your scores if you're not happy with them. And I urge you to do that. Okay, questions? Okay, so over the course of this class, we've covered a number of major systems in the body. This does not imply that any of the body systems are more important than the others. The human body is an integrated mechanism. It is a system of systems. And if we play around with one, if we have a problem with one system, it has effects on many of the others, sometimes indirectly, sometimes directly. For instance, if our GI system isn't working properly, digesting food and so forth, then our body doesn't get the energy it needs to run, which affects every single system in the body. So just think about the fact that we talk about major systems as though there's a hierarchy, and you can claim many things. Certainly, certain systems that have damage to them, such as the heart, have immediate, far-reaching effect. Other systems that get damaged, such as the liver, those effects are no less far-reaching, but they're subtler in the initial stages. So we do need to understand that all of these systems are integrated. We don't have any spare parts. There's a reason for a gallbladder. Can we live without it? Sure, a lot of us do. But it does affect the way our digestive system works, to lose an important organ. We have an appendix. Everybody thinks of an appendix as some sort of vestigial organ. Well, now we know that the appendix is actually part of the immune system, as are our tonsils. And yet we routinely take these things out and think that we can get along without them. People can live without a spleen, which is part of the cardiovascular system, and a place where storage of many cell types occurs. The body being adaptable, incredibly adaptable to stress, is able to make up for the loss of some of these organs. But some we can't. We can't live without a heart. There's no way that the body functions without having a heart that is going to pump the blood. We don't have any other organ that can do that. We can't live without a brain, the brain being the master controller. But that just means that damage to those particular body systems has the immediate far-reaching effect. Okay. So we'll talk about some systems that this week we went from, we talked about the cardiovascular system, we talked about the nervous system, we talked about basic pharmacology, and we talked about variety of other topics, the respiratory system, and then last week we spent our time on pain. Why pain? because it seems like that falls under the nervous system, and it does. But largely, the other emphasis on this class is what are the things you're going to see in your working in medicine. And pain is going to be one of them. We're getting more and more information about pain and about the treatment of pain and about the dangers of pain treatments. So you need to understand those when you're out there working. Okay. So last week, the drug classification, drug class project was due, and you're going to present that today. If you don't have it done and presented today, we will take some time at the beginning of class on Wednesday to make those presentations. The other side of that was the zombie assignment. Are they possible, and what you learned in that particular research. Okay, so Glennis and Cheyenne, you're ready, and you're still not, right? For what? Okay. Did you guys try to work together on the zombie? Not you, okay. Okay, so you two will present that together. And Sarai, are you going to be ready on Wednesday to do those? Okay, great. Then that's where we'll start, and then we'll just go into the final after that. Okay, so let's start with the drug class presentation. Remember, there were two components. One was the paper itself, and the other was your presentation of it. So, which one of you wants to go first? Okay, Cheyenne, you're first. Mm-hmm. We'll do that. All righty. So what I would like you to do is come up here in the front of the class and make the presentation, okay?
Well, yeah, it's a Prezi, so I
Okay.
took like a the link comment thing, and then somehow I figured out how to download it.
Okay, so what I would do is actually go ahead and close these lines up.
Okay.
And shut the door and the lights and we'll go from there. You just turn it around and we can all look at it. You turn it around sort of towards Glennis and Sarah, and we'll sit over here.
Okay, so my drug class was anti-Alzheimer's, and anti-Alzheimer's is a cholinesterase inhibitor. Cholinesterase inhibitor. These help increase the amount of neurotransmitter acetylcholine in the brain.
Acetylcholine.
Acetylcholine helps neurons function well. memantine. This is the name. Memantine. This is the name of an actual drug rather than a class of drugs. But since it's the only one available of its type, experts consider it to be the second category of the dementia treatment drugs. The word roots anti is against. Alzheimer's is progressive mental disorder that can occur in middle or old age due to generalization, degeneration of the brain, and against mental disorder. The three main drugs for the anti-Alzheimer's drugs is donepezil, rivastigmine, and glatiramer. Donepezil, I can't
Donepezil.
Donepezil. The brand name is Aricept. The use is Aricept. I'm just going to call
You
it.
can call it Aricept. That's
Okay. It's used to treat confusion, dementia related to Alzheimer's disease. It does not cure Alzheimer's disease, but it may improve memory, awareness, and the ability to function. This medication is an enzyme blocker that works by restoring the balance of natural substances, or the neurotransmitters in the brain. It is taken orally. The side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, loss of appetite, weight loss, dizziness, drowsiness, weakness, trouble sleeping, shakiness, or muscle cramps. These symptoms take 1 to 3 weeks after just starting to take this drug, but the symptoms go away after that. Oh, you stupid thing. And then rivastigmine, which is their brand name is Exelon. Exelon is part of a class of drugs called cholesterinase inhibitors.
Cholesterol.
I'm gonna mess you up too. It acts to reversibly block the functions of the acetylcholine. By inhibiting this enzyme, it prevents the breakdown of the new neurotransmitters acetylcholine and increases its levels in the brain. This can provide a temporary relief for some of the symptoms of AD by improving the communication between nerve cells in the brain. However, Exelon cannot stop the process of AD as it does not address the underlying cause of the disease. Exelon is used to treat mild to moderate dementia caused by Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. Conditions or the precautions is liver, kidney disease, weight loss or lack of appetite, a heart rhythm disorder, and a large prostate or urination problems, epilepsy, asthma, COPD, history of stomach ulcers, tremors, and uncontrollable muscle movements. So like if you have any of that, you shouldn't be taking this pill. How to take Exelon is usually taken twice a day and taken with food. It's orally. Oral. Side effects are the severe or ongoing vomiting or diarrhea and weight loss, blood or tarry stool, coughing up blood or vomiting blood, a lightheaded feeling, tremors, restless muscle movements, seizures, painful or difficult urination, severe skin redness, itching or irritation, weakness. Drugs that affect Exelon are atropine, metoclopramide, cold or allergy medicine that contains a antihistamine, Benadryl, and others, medicine to treat Parkinson's disease, medication to treat excess stomach acid, stomach ulcers, motion sickness, or irritable bowel syndrome, a beta blocker, Antanol, Carvedillo, labetalol, Metoprolol, Nadolol, Nebol. Okay, you get the idea. That's a lot. Why is it not wanting to? No, no, I just did the free one. The next one is galantamine. Brand name is Razdine or Reminol. Uses: galantamine is used to treat mild to moderate confusion, dementia related to Alzheimer's disease. It does not cure Alzheimer's disease, but it may improve memory, awareness, and the ability to perform daily functions. This medication works by restoring the balance of certain natural substances, the neurotransmitters in the brain. How to take medication by mouth with food, usually twice a day. Side effects: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, drowsiness, loss of appetite, weight loss may occur. Drug interactions are the anticholinergic drugs, cholinergic drugs, cholinergic drugs, cholinesterase inhibitors, long-term use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, drugs affecting liver enzymes that remove galantamine from your body, and etc. The donzepezil ADME is mechanism of action. Donzepezil proposed mechanism of action involves the reversible inhibitors of the cholinesterase, which prevents the hydrolysis of acetylcholine, and leads to an increased concentration of acetylcholine at cholinergic synapses. Evidence suggests that the anticholinergic activity of donzepezil is relatively specific for anticholinergic in the brain. Absorption: donzepezil is well absorbed with a relative oral bioavailability of 100%, reaches peak plasma concentrations in 3 to 4 hours. Metabolized by CYP450 isoenzymes 2D6 and 3,4A or 3A4 and the liver, and is also undergoes glucuronidation. The main metabolite 6,0-desmethyl donzepezil has been reported to inhibit ACHE to the same exact as donzepezil in vitro.
ACHE is just acetylcholinesterase.
I didn't write that from my school. Elimination: both excreted in the urine, intact and extensively metabolized to 4 major metabolites, 2 of which are known to be active, and the number of minor metabolites are not all which have been identified. The half-life is 70 hours. Rivastigmine ADME, the mechanism of action is the precise mechanism of rivastigmine has not been fully determined, but it's suggested that rivastigmine binds reversibly with the inactive cholinesterase, preventing the hydrolysis of acetylcholine and thus leading to increased concentration of acetylcholine at cholinergic synapses. The acetylcholinease activity of rivastigmine is relatively specific to the brain. Acetylcholinease and cholinesterase compared with those of peripheral tissues. Absorption is not available. The metabolism rivastigmine is rapidly metabolized by cholinesterase, medicated hydrolysis, elimination. Rivastine is extensively metabolized, primarily via cholinesterase medicated hydrolysis to the decarbonated metabolite NAP22690. Manel extraction of the metabolites is the major route of elimination. Less than 1% of the administered dose is excreted in the feces, and the half-life is 1.5 hours. Galantamine ADME mechanism of action. Galantamine proposed mechanism of action involves the reversible inhibitor of acetylcholinesterase, which prevents the hydrolysis of acetylcholine, leading to increased concentration of acetylcholine in chlorinates. So nice. Why is there so many of us? Galantine also binds allosterically with nicotinamide acetylcholine receptors and may possibly potentate the action of agonists such as acetylcholine at these receptors. The absorption is not available. The distribution is 125 liters. Metabolism is galantine O-desmethylgaltamine and galtamine N oxide. The elimination, galtamine is metabolized by hepatic cyclone P450 enzymes. Glucuronin and excreted unchanged in the urine. The half-life is 7 hours. And then my resources or references.
Okay. So what, after reading this, what did you read about just how effective these drugs are?
I think it's pretty effective, but it doesn't stop it. It just helps try to regain a little bit.
And how long do they actually work? Was there any information about that? Because people with Alzheimer's can live a long time.
Yeah.
And we know that we develop tolerance to drugs.
Maybe I think they have to switch it off.
Have to change drugs regularly.
Yeah, but I think there's one that I think the donepezil is like the number one.
Yeah, well, there's lots of reasons for that. The other two are a bit newer.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I think that perhaps the side effect profile of diazepam is a little different, a little bit better as well. But okay. So the real issue is, these treatments don't get at the root cause.
Yeah.
We don't know what the root cause is of Alzheimer's, right? Yeah. All we're doing again is treating symptoms. There's a tremendous amount of research going on. We're spending an awful lot of money on this because it appears to be a growing problem. Did you see anything about the extent of the disease? How many patients we see and whether it's growing? Because it seems to me that it's either growing or we are more prone to misdiagnosis. So anyway.
I think it's a misdiagnosis because some people like my grandma, she can play it off when she goes to the doctor, but I know she has Alzheimer's.
Why do you know that?
Or dementia, at least because she creates these paranoia. Paranoia. Like she thinks people land on her house with helicopters and break in and steal her batteries and replace them with dead batteries in her remote for the TV. Or like last night, she was all in one last night, and her strainer, and she's like, my strainer is bigger than that strainer, and I'm like, I've been using the strainer since I started living here. And she's like, well, someone replaced it because that's not my strainer. She constantly is thinking someone's replacing her things with crappier ones. And I'm like, no, this is your stuff. And no. I mean, she has to have.
So she sounds like she has a dementia
Yeah.
of some sort, but Alzheimer's, of course,
Yeah.
can't be diagnosed except at autopsy, not definitively.
But the doctors have no idea. It's just close family knows because
She's very
she's
good.
good at hiding it, and
Oh,
some
yeah.
days are worse than other days.
Mhm.
It depends on how mad she gets about something. That's what like seems to trigger it more.
If you want the doctors to pay more attention to that, you may have to start filming her when she
I
starts.
thought
behaving
about that, yeah.
And then show that to the doctor.
But then she won't let me go to the doctor.
Of course not. She doesn't want anybody there that
She doesn't
knows
want,
what's
yeah.
going on. How does she get to that?
She drives.
That's a little.
Yeah, she drives fine. Well,
I
she
was
looks
gonna say,
at something and then she starts going in that direction. But I mean, she drives all the time. She goes by and she stalks the whole family. She drives by their house, writes down the license plate numbers for every vehicle that's parked in their driveway. And then she goes home and says she was just at the store. I'm like, I know what you do. Yeah, I think it's because she was an alcoholic for a long, long time. And she's not a very nice alcoholic. And I think she's just stuck in that state of constantly being an angry alcoholic. Because when she drinks the beer now, she actually gets nice. So I don't know if it's like mush her brain or something.
yeah, it's unusual. And
Yeah.
if she drinks a beer, she doesn't have to drink 50 more.
No, she just drinks one, maybe two, because she's feeling sick. And then, but she's nice afterwards. She's not all crazy and creating things in her brain.
Well, which tempts you to say, make sure grandma always has a beer.
Yeah.
Not exactly great therapy, but
Yeah, no, but.
if it helps her, and it could be that her dementia comes from destruction of brain matter from alcohol.
Yeah. By drinking it kind of reverses it a little bit. For
That's
an
kind
hour
of,
or two.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's take a break for now, and we'll come back in about 10 to 15 minutes, and Glennis, you can do yours.
You're going out.
So let's get started again. Glennis, you ready? Yep, I see it. We'll do this. We'll do it the same way. You can put your PowerPoint out here, and I'll just show the lights and close the door. Yes, go right ahead.
I got antidepressants. Antidepressants describe drug class is antidepressants work by balancing chemicals in the brain called neurotransmitters that affect mood and the depression medicines can help improve your mood, help you sleep better, and increase your appetite and concentration. Antidepressants description of or relating to a substance that is used to treat in the treatment of mood disorders as characterized by various mechanic and depressive effects. Antidepressants top 3 drugs, generic name. First is Celexa, trade name citalopram.
Citalopram.
Is it citalopram? Okay. Lexapro, Ciprex, trade name. Oh my God, I can't pronounce it. Escitalopram.
Escitalopram.
So it's with an I.
E. S. It's like saying S-citalopram. And that's really means it's a derivative of citalopram.
And Prozac, and its trade name is
Fluoxetine.
The citalopram, is that?
Mhm.
Okay. Citalopram belongs in a class of antidepressant agents known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Its uses is for citalopram is used to treat depression. It may improve your energy level and feeling of well-being. Citalopram is known as a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. This medicine works by helping to restore the balance of a certain natural substance, serotonin, in the brain. You take this medication with or without food as directed by your doctor, usually once daily in the morning or evening. Some side effects are nausea, dry mouth, loss of appetite, tiredness, drowsiness, sweating, blurred vision, yawning, and yawning may occur. Interactions. Some products that may interact with this drug include other drugs that can cause bleeding, bruising, including anti-platelet drugs such as clopidogrel, NSAID such as ibuprofen, blood thinners such as warfarin, as well as aspirin and MOA inhibitors. Escitalopram is used to treat depression and anxiety. It works by helping to restore the balance of a certain natural substance, serotonin, in the brain. So
Escitalopram.
I can't pronounce it.
Just take it one syllable at a time.
Escitalopram
There you go.
belongs to a class of drugs known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It may improve your energy level and feelings as well, being decreased nervousness. How to use: take this medication by mouth, with or without food as directed by your doctor, usually once daily in the morning or evening. Side effects may be nausea, dry mouth, trouble sleeping, constipation, tiredness, drowsiness, dizziness, and increased sweating may occur. Some interactions are: some products that may interact with this drug include other drugs that can cause bleeding, bruising, ibuprofen, blood thinners, aspirin, fluoxetine. Fluoxetine is used to treat depression, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, a certain eating disorder like bulimia, and severe form of premenstrual syndrome. How to use: take this medication by mouth as directed by your doctor, usually once daily in the morning. If you are taking this medication twice a day, your doctor may direct you to take it in the morning and at night. Side effects: nausea, drowsiness, dizziness, anxiety, trouble sleeping, loss of appetite, tiredness, sweating, or yawning may occur. I feel like I sound like those commercials on TV. Interactions. Some products that may interact with this drug include drugs removed from your body by certain liver enzymes, including vinblastine. Okay. Anti-arrhythmetics such as
That's propoxetine, I think.
okay, and
Flexeril.
okay. Tricycline antidepressants such as desipramine, imipramine. Other drugs can be cause bleeding, bruising, including anti-pathway drugs such as clopidogrel, such as ibuprofen, blood thinners such as citalopram ADME. Mechanism of action. The mechanism of action of citalopram results from its inhibitors of NS neural reuptake of serotonin. Absorption: rapidly and well absorbed from the GI tract. Peak plasma concentration occur within 4 hours of a single oral administered dose. Bioavailability is 80% following an oral administration. Food does not affect absorption. Volume of distribution is 12 liters over pound. Metabolism. I can't even say that word. Citalopram is metabolized maintainedly in the liver via an dilation. Its main metabolite, and I can't say that word.
Demethyl.
Okay. Route of elimination is 12 to 23% of oral dose. Citalopram is found unchanged in the urine, while 10% of the dose is found in the feces. Half-life, 35 hours. Escitalopram. The antidepressant, anti-abusive, compulsive, and anti-bulimic actions of escitalopram are presumed to be linked to its inhibitor of NSC neural uptake of serotonin. Escitalopram blocks the reuptake of serotonin at the serotonin reuptake pump of the neural membrane, enhancing the actions of serotonin of 5-HT1A antireceptors. The absorption is the absolute bioavailability of citalopram is about 80% related to an intravenous dose. Volume of distribution is 12 liters per pound. Metabolism is mainly peptic. Route of elimination following order administration of escitalopram. The fraction of drug recovered in the urine as escitalopram and escitalopram, about 8% and 10% respectively. The oral clearance of escitalopram is 600 milliliters over minute, which is approximately 7% of the due renal clearance. Escitalopram is metabolized to SDCT and Okay. Half-life is 27 to 32 hours. Fluoxetine is metabolized to how do you say that word again?
Norfluoxetine.
Fluoxetine. Fluoxetine is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It blocks the reuptake of serotonin and the serotonin reuptake pump of the neural membrane, enhancing the actions of serotonin on 5-HT1A. Autoreceptors SSRIs bind of significantly less affinity to histamine, acetylcholine, and
Norepinephrine.
receptors and tricyclic antidepressant drugs. Absorption will absorb from the GI tract following oral administration. Volume distribution 20 to 45 liters over pound. Metabolism. Limited data from animal studies suggested that fluoxetine, is that how you say it?
Fluoxetine is how I pronounce it.
Fluoxetine may undergo first pass metabolism, may occur via the liver or lungs. Fluoxetine appears in the excessive metabolized, likely in the liver, to norfluoxetine and other metabolites. Route of elimination. The primary route of elimination appears to be hepatic metabolism to inactive metabolites excreted to the kidney. The is eliminated more slowly and is predominant in and more present at safety states. Half-life is 1 to 3 days and 4 to 16 days.
All right. So the class of drugs you looked at mainly are the current sort of first line approaches that people use, which are the serotonin reuptake inhibitors. There are many other kinds of antidepressants. Did you run into any information as to why you would choose one over another?
I feel like some would, it depends on the person's body, because I know my cousin does depression, and there's certain drugs that she was prescribed at first, and she could not. Like, she had a lot of those side effects, which means like, she could not take those drugs. So
Right.
I feel like it depends on the person's body and how it reacts to it.
Okay. That's a big part of it for sure. Again, depression is one of those areas where there seems to be a lot of research going on.
Did you see anything about new drugs coming out?
I did not look into
Okay.
Great, well, thank you very much. Yeah. Having done that, are you guys ready for your zombie presentation?
Yeah, are we supposed to, it's just a.
It's just a paper, and you submit it to me, yeah. Make sure both of your names are on.
Yeah, it's just a paper.
That's all you have to submit. You don't have to have a PowerPoint unless you want. Or,
I thought it
or the whole paper can be a PowerPoint. Yeah, no, the whole paper can be a PowerPoint. It was, the issue was that we wanted to see, we wanted to be sure that, you know, the information was there. This was to be kind of a fun project rather than something that stressed you out.
So this website that I found a lot of the admin questions on, that I like have all of it, is called Drug Bank. .ca, the what we just did.
Okay.
But it has
Yeah, I have like
all the
a
admin stuff. So
Thank
you
you.
don't have to look all over.
Thank you.
What are you teaching us next month?
I'm teaching professional development and English, the composition class.
Are you doing professional development online?
I will be teaching it in the mornings. Are you doing it online? Sarai, let's talk about your participation in that class too. Professional development next month.
You know,
Yes, I just talked to Christy about
which
it.
is like.
Yeah.
Where does it have the class also?
Can we go get our schedules real quick?
Yeah. I'll talk to Sarai about this.
Okay, professional medical coding, medical records.
That's different. Okay. Yeah, you'll be in the class. I understand that at the same time you're going to be taking your capstone with Cal. And what I talked to Christy about was, given the nature of the way that class works, if you come from in the morning from 8:30 to 10:30, you can get everything you need out of that class, because most of the work's going to be done by you offline or out of class anyway, writing your resume, cover letter, etc. So what we talked about was, you can do my class for the first part of the morning and then go to TEL, because it's really important for you to review all those skills.
Okay.
And then you won't have any trouble with the professional development part of the class that you're going to be taking. And you know, you can always talk to me if you have any questions, issues. I will be recording the class, so you can actually pick up the class from where you left and look at the rest if you want.
Okay, dang. Yeah, I was supposed to get my classes, and then I guess it's like super, I know, because Capstone is doing it.
Yes.
And I was planning on going somewhere, not on vacation, but I was gonna be gone for a week, and I guess.
Well, you'll have to, with the professional development class, will you be in a place where you can get online?
Yeah, I will make it happen.
Yeah. For the professional development class, that's okay. I've got another student who can't be in class at all, so I am recording every class. But the capstone, you need to work out yourself. Because there's a lot of stuff. When I teach it, I mean, we're busy. And I know it's no different with her. So, but yeah, with the professional development, that's not going to be. Yeah, she is.
Online classes.
Pardon?
Both my classes are online.
And you, Glennis?
I have a specialist in health.
That's right, you need a website.
Yeah, well, I was taking it.
Yeah, the review things.
Yeah, and then I guess they tried to make a vital signs class so that we could all help out at the health fair. So they
Yeah.
made it possible.
Yeah, we want as many of you guys as possible. We're limited as to the number of phlebotomy students, or the number of student phlebotomists. And I'll be proctoring that part of the fair. And Nate will be running the vital signs part. So,
They do vital signs, but we're gonna come in and do like a refresher course.
yeah, it's a good idea. It's something that I find that when you take vital signs months ago, and you never take a blood pressure since,
Yeah.
it's really
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
When I teach the medical capstone, I was telling sorry, I keep people pretty busy, but one of the things I try to do is every single class, you do vital signs. Because you'll do that all the time in your work.
I don't mind.
Okay, so are you ready for your zombie presentation? You don't, you're not gonna be using a, right?
No.
What we'll do is we'll turn on the light, so don't get blinded.
So how should we read this?
It's up to you how you want to present it.
We just
Well, it's pretty informal, so yes.
No, I mean, I can read half and you read half.
Whenever you stop working.
All right, so we found out that the zombie drug is tetrodotoxin. The substance that is a natural product that indicates a state that is very close resembling what we portray in zombie movies, comics, and stories is tetrodotoxin. Common names that are associated with tetrodotoxin are voodoo poison, maculotoxin, cephalosporin, tacryotoxin, tetrodotoxin, and TTX. The appearance of tetrodotoxin is colorless, crystalline solid that darkens when heated above 428 degrees. Tetrodotoxin is an extremely potent poison found mainly in liver and sex organs of some fish, such as pufferfish, blowfish, and toadfish, and in some amphibian, octopus, and shellfish species. Human poisoning occurs when the flesh and or organs of the fish are improperly prepared and eaten. Tetrodotoxin interferes with the transmission of signals from nerves to muscles and causes an increasing paralysis of the muscles of the body. Tetrodotoxin poisoning can be fatal. The flesh of the pufferfish is a delicacy in Japan. It is prepared by chefs specially trained and certified by the government to prepare the flesh free of the toxin, liver, gonads, and skin. Despite these precautions, many cases of tetrodotoxin poisoning are reported each year. The toxic dose, however, is unclear because pufferfish have a different concentration of tetrodotoxin, as a dose of 1 to 2 milligrams of purified toxin can be lethal. CDC has documented that toxicity with ingestion of as little as 1.4 ounces of the pufferfish. The level of toxicity is seasonal, and fugu is served only from October through March. Tetrodotoxin is a heat stable except in alkaline environments and water soluble protein.
It is a heterophilic and small organic molecule that acts directly on the electricity active sodium channel in the tetrodotoxin blocks diffusion of sodium through the sodium channel, thus preventing depolarization and propagation of action potentials in your cells. Material safety data sheet of tetra. How do you say that word?
Tetrodotoxin.
Tetrodotoxin
Right.
lists the oral medium lethal dose of micro 334 mg per kg. 22, assuming the lethal dose of human is similar, 25 milligrams of tetrodotoxin would be expected to kill a 75-pound person. No, 170. Tetrodotoxin poison may either be onset to 10 to 45 minutes or a delayed onset, generally within 3 to 6 hours, but rarely longer. Death may occur as early as 20 minutes or as late as 24 hours after exposure, but usually occurs within the first 48 hours. There is no antidote to tetrodotoxin. We have reference listed, so
All right. So, upload that. All right.
do
Um,
we both have to do it?
As long as both of your names are on. And then, that's fine. So,
Where do we, upload it to?
there should be an assignment for it.
There's an assignment, but it's just submitting them.
Okay, well then just hand it to me on paper. That's fine. Obviously, I didn't make that a submitted assignment. Oh, I see why. Okay. Yeah, just give me a copy of it. Okay. Okay, what did you find most interesting about this project?
It comes from, I always heard like there was some type of fish that was named. With how dangerous it is, it's hard to just. I was just.
Well, that's sort of my feeling. Some of it has to do with risk taking. And other parts of it have to do with apparently the pufferfish has a very, very appealing flavor to a lot of people. Personally, appealing flavor or not, I would probably still say, I don't think so. Forget the fugu. And I have seen it on menus in Japan, and always thought, do I trust this guy to know what he's doing? Yeah, and I wouldn't know. And on top of that, most of the time you go into places like that. I do not speak Japanese, so it's hard for me to ask any questions. So my method of choosing the sushi that I wanted was the point and grunt method. But the issue for a lot of it has to do with really, apparently it has a very delicate and wonderful flavor. One of the things that I found interesting, I didn't realize that there were certain octopus species that also have this. And I was thinking specifically of a little bitty octopus, only about this big, with its tentacles out, called the blue ringed octopus, which is found in the Australian Great Barrier Reef area, and is listed as the deadliest octopus on the planet. This little bitty thing is not going to eat you, but it's the toxin that does you in. So and they're kind of cute. They're really pretty little critters, but you just don't want to pick one up unless you're feeling particularly suicidal. So, any other comments on your project?
No, I think.
Okay, so make sure I have a copy of your presentation. And okay,
Okay.
and we'll go on next with with talking about other things. And so, Sarai, we'll start off with you on Wednesday. All right. All right. Let's see. I wanted to start by talking initially about, come on, where are you? There you are. About the endocrine system. I've got some handouts, as usual.
Do you know where I can get a red journal?
Talk to Christy about that.
Well, I'm done real quick. I was having a hard time with my ORA.
Okay.
I just need to see one of these.
Okay, two more. A whole bunch of these. Yeah, I just need one. Thank you. Right. All right. Oh, well, you know, they grow, sort of. What I wanted to spend some time is just talking in general about the endocrine system. But since it's now 10:30, we should take our second break. We'll come back and talk about that after the second break, okay? Okay. So I want to talk about the endocrine system. Endocrine system is a multi-organ system that is responsible for the generation of hormones. Hormones are a wide variety of different kinds of chemical compounds. They can be proteins, such as insulin. Insulin is a protein hormone. They can be corticosteroids. They can be prostaglandins and leukotrienes, which are long chain fatty molecules. They can be a wide variety of different entities. All of them work by regulating bodily cellular and other processes in the body, the processes of our organs. So the term hormone itself is very, very general. and really applies only to these things that actually cause changes in function within the body. The way they work is through a complex feedback mechanism, so that these very, very powerful molecules are controlled. For instance, there is a whole sequence of hormones that gets released through a process that involves the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and then the individual gland, whether it be the thyroid or the adrenal glands or anything else. What happens is the hypothalamus sends a signal to the pituitary, and that signal is a hormone called a releasing hormone. And what that does is tell the pituitary to start the process. The pituitary then releases a hormone called a stimulating hormone that goes to the target organ, whether that's the adrenals or the thyroid or the pancreas. And then that organ releases the actual hormone. That hormone goes into the plasma, and when it reaches a certain level of concentration, then what happens is the hypothalamus and the pituitary shut off their signals. Now, there are many organs that are active in the endocrine system. Besides the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the thyroid, there are the parathyroids, which are little bitty glands that are little patches on the thyroid itself, the adrenals, the pineal body, ovaries in women, testes in men, and the pancreas. Pancreas is a double duty organ. It not only is affected and generates hormones like insulin, but it also is involved in the digestive process. So this is an organ that is a little different than some of the others. Most of the organs in the endocrine system do not have ducts. In other words, they do not put things out of the organ via a tube or duct, such as the pancreas has. The pancreatic duct is what puts pancreatic enzymes into the GI system to help with the digestion of food. The thyroid, on the other hand, doesn't have any ducts. It releases its signals directly into the plasma, into the bloodstream, because, of course, these organs are vascularized. They get a blood supply, so we're able to do that. So, for example, the hypothalamus, when it's necessary for the thyroid to produce thyroid hormones, the hypothalamus sends out a signal called thyrotropin releasing hormone, or TRH. This is one of the things that sometimes are measured when they're doing thyroid tests. This goes to the pituitary, where the pituitary releases TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. This hormone then goes to the thyroid, which then generates the thyroid hormones known as T3 and T4. T4 is what we call thyroxine. T4 is called, we call it 4 because it's a reasonable sized molecule that has 4 iodine atoms attached to it. T3 has 3, so it's called triiodothyronine or threonine, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And this does a lot to regulate our body's metabolism, such as generating heat. So it's our body's thermostat. How do we properly use carbohydrates and proteins and fats. Thyroid hormones are responsible for regulating growth and development in children. So if children are developing and growing way past the norm, whether slower or faster, one of the suspicions is malfunction within the generation of thyroid hormone in the body of those children. That's not 100% because there are natural reasons for people to grow at different rates. Thyroid disease. We're going to talk about the thyroid for a little bit. Thyroid disease is one of the most common in the world. In the United States, one of the leading drugs sold in terms of prescriptions written is levothyroxine, which is a synthetic form of thyroxine. Now, synthetic in this case means that even though it is exactly the same molecule as the thyroid produces, it's not produced in a living system. We make it in a manufacturing plant. These work better. These synthetic forms of thyroxine work better than animal extracts, which was until we really knew how to make levothyroxine, and when it came in, animal extracts were the only source. And we still have something called Armour thyroid. Armour, you may or may not remember, is a large, started off as a large meat packing operation. And in the slaughter of animals in preparation for packaging, either in fresh form or in canned form, the process of slaughtering the animal, we end up with a lot of bits and pieces of the animal that people don't eat, such as the thyroids, such as the pancreas, and other organs. People do eat kidneys, they do eat livers, though looking at the livers of animals in packing plants these days, I'm not sure I would do that. But they will eat various organ meat. But there are some organs we don't just generally eat, like the adrenal glands and the thyroid, pancreas, and so forth. And so for a long time, until we had the ability to synthetically prepare hormones, a lot of times the hormones were extracted from these animal organs. Many of these hormones, thyroxine being one, and insulin being another, are what we call highly conserved, which means that across mammalian species, they're exactly the same molecule. There's no difference. And so the extraction of these was the original source for both insulin and thyroid hormones. With modern manufacturing techniques, there's a couple of things. Extracting these things from animal tissues is as much art as it is science. The process is so dependent on the quality of the tissues that we're working with, on the expertise of the people doing the process. Just many factors render these things less desirable. Plus, when we discovered that that many of our food animals carry viruses that could be transmitted to us through these extracts, this whole method of preparing drugs lost a lot of its luster. And so one of the hormones that we used to do was we would extract human growth hormone, HGH, from the pituitaries of cadavers. And what happened was, human growth hormone is not a huge market. in terms of the number of patients. We're talking about people who are in the bottom few percentile of the growth chart. So their long bones aren't growing, and dwarfism is one of the things. Dwarfs are people with normal sized torsos but short arms and legs. That's the classic definition. But with human growth hormone, what happened was for a long time that the source was human pituitary, human cadaver pituitaries. So on autopsy, the pituitary would be harvested and the growth hormone would be extracted from it. Now you need minute amounts of growth hormone. So this was a supply that was probably adequate. The problem was one of the places they came from was a place that didn't really screen the cadavers. And so we had a number of young kids who were given human growth hormone extracted from pituitaries. And it had to be injected because it's a protein. And they were contaminated with HIV. And so these kids were given, basically, in order to grow, they got AIDS, which is a nasty trade-off at best. So one of the very first biotech products was a recombinant human growth hormone that was grown in bacteria and grown under conditions that they could control and test for the presence of infectious viruses and other things, and control for that. And so I actually had a student down in Denver 6 years ago, I guess, who was one of the very first experimental subjects with Genentech's human growth hormone. And she was not tall, but she was not short. She was she was maybe an inch or two shorter than me. So she was within normal limits of height. And it's because she had been given this drug and it worked on her. So, so there were reasons that we went away from extracting these things from animals. About between 25 and 30 million Americans have what we call abnormally active thyroid glands. Either they produce too much thyroxine or too little thyroxine. Too little thyroxine, since thyroxine controls our metabolism slows down. So part of the issue with hypothyroidism as opposed to hyper is weight gain, temperature sensitivity. Now, just because you're sensitive to temperature doesn't mean you have a bad thyroid. So don't go there, because a lot of people are sensitive to temperature, and there are many other mechanisms that are involved in that particular issue. But it is something that's characteristic of hypothyroidism. So people tend to gain weight. They tend to have other issues as well. Extreme cases, they'll have an appearance of bug-eyed. Their eyes will be wide and sort of protrude a little. Those are some of the symptoms. But in reality, what happens is we measure thyroid function in the body, and we ask ourselves, is this within the normal limits? 25 to 30 million Americans is about 10% of the population. That's pretty big. It's a pretty large chunk of population that would that have this kind of condition. Hyperthyroidism, however, is a condition where your metabolism is upregulated. You tend to be skeletally thin, and again, just because you're skinny does not mean that you have a hyperactive thyroid. There are many other factors that go into that. There are many other genetic issues to deal with, but these are some of the issues. What happens when thyroids are out of bounds is that it changes the way virtually every system in our body functions. It changes issues in our cardiovascular system. It changes the generation of hepatic metabolizing enzymes. It changes cardiac functions, heart rate, and the force of contractions. There are many things that happen. Thyroid hormones are responsible for controlling the actions and growth of our skeletal tissues, our long bones and short bones. And so bones just don't get put down and that's the way it is the rest of your life. There is a dynamic turnover in the components of bone, the calcium. This is why it's critical if you have osteoporosis or osteomalacia, which is the beginning stages of softening bones, and sometimes goes on to become full-blown osteoporosis. And as you know, osteoporosis is weak bones. They tend to break easily. And again, just because bones break doesn't mean you're osteoporotic. If you are, say, an extreme sports enthusiast, you're probably going to break a lot of bones in your life. If you are a relatively inactive person, and your bones are strong, you're not likely to do that. I mean, relatively inactive meaning not involved in things that have high risk. So the thyroid controls this turnover in the bone. If you are having trouble with softening of bone tissue and osteoporosis, this is why people want you to make sure you have a balance of not just calcium, but you need phosphate, you need phosphorus-containing compounds, you need vitamin A, you need magnesium, you need zinc. Bones are very, very complex. And there's a constant turnover of osteocytes, which are the bone cells. And a healthy bone is going to turn over, a number of times in your lifetime. But it's always rebuilding because just sitting there leads to changes in structure from the stresses that we put on our bones. And so the bone turnover is regulated by the thyroid. We use a lot of diagnostic tests. We look for thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, which if it's low, is a warning signal that hyperthyroidism is likely to be a problem. We look at the two different two different forms of thyroid hormone, T4 thyroxine and T3 triiodothyronine, and look for those as well. Again, high levels, in this case, high levels of T4, when you look at that, indicates hyperthyroidism, overactivity. Low levels, hypothyroidism. We have another test that often is run when you're doing a full thyroid panel, and that is a thyroid antibody test. In a thyroid antibody test, you're looking for antibodies against the thyroid gland. There are Hashimoto's disease, for one, is a disease that is listed as an autoimmune disease. And it is a function of the body attacking the thyroid tissue. And in terms of looking at the thyroid itself, over time, the thyroid begins to shrink and therefore doesn't have a lot of, doesn't have the ability to produce enough. In extreme cases of trying to figure out what's going on with the thyroid, we might give radioactive iodine. Iodine is only absorbed by the thyroid in the body. So if you are given a dose of radioactive iodine, it will localize in the thyroid. If again, in the thyroid, there's this constant production of thyroxine and T3. And so the iodine gets, the radioactive iodine gets picked up by the thyroid hormones. And so if we have a high level of radiation in our measured in and around our thyroid, it indicates hyperthyroidism, and if it's low, it indicates hypothyroidism. My major issue with that test is although it's very useful for answering this question, radioactive iodine is also a source of thyroid cancer, and we have to be careful when we do iodine tests because overdosing on iodine can actually damage the thyroid as well. A number of years ago, when that reactor blew up in Fukushima in Japan, the concern was the spread of radioactive iodine to the United States. This is what happened in Europe when the Chernobyl reactor went back in the 1980s. And a cloud of radioactive iodine went out over parts of Europe, and we could measure where that cloud was by the increased incidence in thyroid cancers at that time. So the concern was in the United States with people was that we wanted to avoid absorbing radioactive iodine when it got here. I don't know if it ever did, truthfully. But what happened was people bought up all of the potassium iodide that was on the shelves of health food stores, figuring that if they flooded their bodies with non-radioactive iodine, it would be less likely to pick up radioactive iodine. They didn't realize that the levels of iodine that they were proposing to take were going to cause more damage to their thyroid than they'd likely experience even if they had thyroid cancer. So there was a warning that went out. First off, all that stuff disappeared from the shelves. No one had anticipated, I think, that Americans would figure out real fast that they should take this stuff. It disappeared from the shelves, and then a warning went out not to take it. Okay. The causes of hyperthyroidism are a few, and many of them, other causes are not necessarily known very well. But one of them is thyroid tumors. A thyroid tumor will cause excessive growth of thyroid cells and then production of thyroid hormone. Inflammation will also do that. Hyperthyroidism may be also triggered by Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disease. in which the antibodies to thyroid stimulating hormone actually mimic the activity of the hormone itself. Hyperthyroidism, many things happen. Remember, thyroid controls metabolism. You pump more thyroid into the body, the metabolism rate goes up. Well, also, heart rate goes up. We get some interesting issues with the way our muscles work. We actually get weakened muscles and muscle wasting. We have sometimes tremor, nervousness, shortness of breath. I mean, just a lot of different things. In women, there can be amenorrhea, interfere with your menstrual periods. Can have breast enlargement. And by the way, if you want larger breasts, don't take thyroid hormone. Not a good idea. But you can have a lot of different things. How do we treat it? Well, treating an overactive thyroid involves involves in this case a proper use of radioactive iodine, because the radioactivity in iodine will destroy some of the thyroid tissue. Now, remember, I also said that it can also cause thyroid cancer. So that is a two-edged sword. We have drugs that can shut down the thyroid. The use of those is, I think, has been in the past controversial. But the other thing that happens if you go into extreme hyperthyroidism is that they will remove your thyroid, in which case you are on thyroid medication for the rest of your life. I don't know any of the details because I never thought to ask her. But my mother had no thyroid, and she was on Synthroid all of her life. And we could see it because she had a scar that went directly across her throat at the level of the thyroid where they had removed it. I don't believe it was cancer. I think it was because it was hyperactive. With radioactive iodine, we're looking at at about 2 to 3 months of therapy, which means getting injected with radioactive iodine regularly in this process. We have a series of drugs that will block the synthesis of thyroxine and triiodothyronine. It takes a while for these things to work. Again, drugs are often have side effects that we don't necessarily like, and that is goiter, hepatitis, arthritis. I always wondered if my mother's arthritis was triggered by her whatever treatments they were giving her for her hyperthyroidism. Hypothyroidism can result from the treatment for hyperthyroidism. If you're giving drugs to shut down the thyroid, what happens when you take patients off the drugs? Often they go into hypothyroidism because the drugs have messed up with their thyroid. Some other medications for other conditions like lithium and a few others can cause hypothyroidism. Removal of the thyroid can. If the pituitary, for whatever reason, some sort of chemical or other reason, stops producing thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, then that will lead to hypothyroidism because it's not getting the thyroid isn't getting the signal to produce the hormone. Inflammation of the thyroid can also lead to hypothyroidism. And then, of course, there's always congenital effects. In other words, if you're born with an inactive or underactive thyroid. The symptoms are a mixed lot: slowed heart rate, lethargy, in other words, no energy, changes in hair and voice, possibly an enlarged heart because the heart is trying to beat stronger to make up for the lower rate of beating, thus leading to hypertension. And as I said before, intolerance of cold. So we have mainly drugs that replace, for treatment of hypothyroidism, we use drugs for replacing either T4, T3, or both, or in much smaller use, the thyroid preparations from Armour Thyroid. Levothyroxine, known as Synthroid, Levithroid, and several other generic names, is the most used form of thyroid replacement hormone. And here's one of the weirdnesses of generic preparations. Apparently, and I'm not sure of the reasoning behind this, apparently once you start with a form of levothyroxine, whether it's the originator drug Synthroid or one of the generics, that's what you need to stay with for your life. Apparently, since it is one of the largest selling drugs, there are quite a few generic versions. Apparently, the generic versions are not necessarily equivalent, because with this drug, like many others, we have to titrate you onto your dose. Doctors can guess how much you need. And they do a pretty good job of it. I mean, endocrinologists know their stuff really well. But they still, with each individual, have to take a guess. And so what happens when they do is they will, if they don't get the response they're after, they will then want to, they will change, they'll up the dose or lower the dose if necessary. And what we find is that if people then use a different generic from a different manufacturer, even though it seems to be the same, it's been approved by the FDA as being bioequivalent, etc., they just don't seem to work as well. And I don't know why. But the most common treatment is levothyroxine. So that's what I wanted to say about the thyroid. Other parts, I think you can expect to find in questions on the exam about other parts of this handout that I've given you. The effects of, we're going to talk a bit about diabetes when we come back from our next break. But the adrenal hormones are used to control a variety of conditions in which that lead to that are useful in treating inflammation, skin diseases, MS, but they don't cure anything. The use of these hormones from the adrenal glands look at how we process water and salt, how we metabolize carbohydrates, and they themselves will produce anti-inflammatory effects. So they're internal anti-inflammatory drugs. As I said, we'll talk about other aspects of the inflammatory of insulin in a minute. As I said before, part of the adrenal or the endocrine system is some of the reproductive organs, the ovaries, the testes, these produce various forms of hormones that regulate, again, many body functions. So that's what I wished to address in that. I'd like you to read the entire handout. The use of hormone therapy is something that is in treating menopause is something that's coming into again attack. Pardon? Okay, is coming under attack, what happens is that menopause is not a disease; it's a natural process. It's what happens when the body is no longer, the female body is no longer producing eggs, and since that has an effect on the homeostasis of the body is readjusting. So it has a number of different signs and symptoms that vary with the individual. One of the things that has been used in the past for treating menopause has included hormone replacement therapy. There are many people who are very concerned about that because of the side effects. I hope you all live long enough to go through menopause, but when you do, think strongly about how you're going to deal with it. Some people don't need any pharmacological intervention at all. Others, the effects are so devastating that they need some form of intervention. But think about those. People use antidepressants. They use neurological agents. They use modulators of estrogen receptors. They use all sorts of things. Oral contraceptives, even though obviously they're not needed if you're no longer producing eggs, but they can help with hormone levels. But again, be careful. In men, as we age, an organ of our reproductive system, the prostate, has problems. prostate problems include the scariest of them is, of course, prostate cancer. But prostate cancer caught early is almost 100% curable. But more likely, you're going to find that in a large prostate, we call it benign prostatic hyperplasia. In other words, more tissue. It's just bigger, interferes with urination, and we have drugs that will help shrink that and very successfully. Okay, so let's take our last break, make it a kind of a short one. And then I've got about a half an hour of more information I'd like to talk about before we go off to, before I send you off to do some catch-up work on your assignments. Let you have some time for that, okay? So I'll be back in about 5 or so minutes, and we'll get going in class again. We're going to talk about diabetes. Diabetes is epidemic in this nation. Diabetes can either be one of two forms. Type 1 diabetes is also, used to be called juvenile onset diabetes. It is also known as insulin-dependent diabetes, though that implies that the other type, type 2, is not. We'll get to that in a second. Basically, diabetes is a disorder that involves the use of glucose by the body. A chronic condition in which the body is not properly able to convert food into energy. So glucose begins to accumulate in the body and in the bloodstream, and causing cellular and organ damage. It is the leading cause of non-combat related or non-war related amputations. Largely because if you don't metabolize sugar, you don't heal. When you don't heal, then the body, then you often will find people with necrosis and gangrene of body tissues, leading to amputations. We used to have see the sequence go with diabetic patients, especially in the South, where diabetes was a major problem. In the area we were living, we would see people with their diabetes. They'd lose toes, then they'd lose their legs below the knee, then they'd lose their upper legs, and eventually they would simply die. There are a lot of diabetics in this country. The slide you have is a little bit out of date. It's the estimates now are that we have about 27 million diabetics in this country. 27 million. So again, we're approaching a 10% of our population, and it's growing. Diabetes is not limited to the Western world. It's the fastest growing disease in the two most populous nations on the planet, nations which have been in the past considered to have healthier diets. India, largely a Hindu nation, that the diet tends to be more vegetarian, and so many of the things that we think of as being bad parts of our diet are not there. They have something like almost 40 million diabetics. Now, that's a smaller proportion of a 1.25 billion population than in the US, but it's still an awful lot of people, and it's growing very, very rapidly. China has well over 40 million diabetics already. And China, again, a country where the diet is heavily vegetarian. So it's very, very rapidly growing. And And many of our diabetics don't even know they have it. So the problem with diabetes is also that we have many other changes. Diabetics, since you don't process sugar and derive energy well from it, diabetics tend to be sicker. They tend to have problems with healing. They have problems with cognition. The brain is the highest energy using organ in the body. And so diabetics don't think right, especially ones that don't control their disease very well. And also, because of the way it works out, diabetics have to be not just careful of their diet, they can't drink alcohol. Alcohol is deadly to diabetics. So it is something that that is a major issue. The diabetes, blood glucose levels are controlled by secretions from two different types of cells, alpha cells and beta cells, and what are called the islets of Langerhans, which are on the pancreas. When blood glucose levels rise, the beta cells will secrete insulin, which then encourages the metabolism and usage of sugar. When blood glucose levels fall, because beta cells will also help sugar be stored in glycogen. When blood glucose levels fall, the alpha cells on the islets release glucagon, which then takes glycogen and starts knocking off sugar molecules so that the body can have a source of sugar. The glucagon, insulin is known as the hormone of plenty, which again, it's a protein hormone. Normal serum glucose is 80 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. And anything outside that range is abnormal. But insulin helps glucose molecules enter cells, and thereby allowing the cells to have the energy molecule sugar, glucose, in it. It also promotes protein synthesis. Glucagon, on the other hand, is triggered by hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, and it, as I said, takes glycogen and cleaves off glucose molecules to raise the sugar level. Fasting, how do we diagnose? You'll see in your practice, whether you're in a doctor's office or you're in a pharmacy, you'll see a lot of diabetics. As I say, what we do is we'd like to look at fasting blood sugar levels, although we're finding that fasting isn't really necessary. For instance, when you go to nowadays, when you go to 9 Health Fair, unless there is an other reason your doctor is ordered a fasting level, they don't care whether you fast or not, because what we look at is the level in our blood. And if the normal levels, as I said, were 80 to 100, hypoglycemia is below 80, and her hyperglycemia, in other words, high blood sugar, is above 200. Since it is a major problem, we look for signs of diabetes. As I said, type 1 is actually considered an autoimmune disease where the immune system has destroyed beta cells. We have to give, this is generally the juvenile onset, though I've known people whose type 1 diabetes has set on as late as their early 20s. Insulin injections, regular insulin injections are the therapy for that. Type 2 diabetes, which really is most of it, is often a lifestyle disease, poor diet, and other factors. 90% or so of the diabetic population is type 2. We have drugs to handle that, but as the disease progresses, it's also known as insulin tolerance. As the disease progresses, a lot of times you end up having to have insulin supplements as well. And then somewhere in the range of 5% of women will develop gestational diabetes, which has a slightly higher rate of conversion to type 2 diabetes later in life. Okay, you should take a look at the slideshow that we have here for this. I'm going to jump ahead and talk about criteria when you are looking at a blood tests. The diagnosis for diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2, is an A1C, which is an enzyme system level greater than 6.5%. Fasting glucose, plasma glucose level greater than 126 milligrams per deciliter, or a 2-hour glucose level and the oral glucose tolerance test, where you drink that horrible sugar stuff and then have a blood test. Pardon? Yeah, it's awful stuff. You often will see it, especially it's used in pregnant women looking at the potential for gestational diabetes. But what happens is you take a blood sample, measure the glucose, obviously, and then you swallow this awful sweet stuff. And there's a couple of them, glucola they call it, but it's basically basically Coke syrup. Or they've got some other stuff. There's a red syrupy stuff they give people now as well. I'm told that they're both awful. And then 2 hours later, you measure the plasma level. If it's greater than 200, then that is a criterion for a diagnosis. Yes, but usually you do, because the problem is if you don't keep them there, they don't come back. So you do. Or if you just do a random plasma glucose, just come in and get your glucose measure. If it's above 200, then that's presumptive disease. That's presumptive glucose. A diabetic, we're looking at trying to keep them either with drugs or insulin below 125. So go ahead and take a look at that particular slideshow. And the reason that I'd like you to do that is that there's a lot of information about the types of insulin and why we would use them. Regular insulin used to be extracted from animal sources, pigs, sheep, cows, because, as I said before, insulin is used in virtually everything. Almost every life form on this planet, every animal life form, except for a couple of species of spider and a couple of other species, use insulin for processing glucose. And insulin is remarkably similar across all of those species. So it's a critical part of it's a critical part of the way we evolved on this planet. But our insulin, regular insulin, we have has been either extracted from animals or is made synthetically. We have intermediate acting. It's been slightly modified so that it's not metabolized immediately. And then we have some long-acting and ultra-long-acting forms. Again, the object here is to have some form of control over the disease, and often patients will have mixtures of rapid-acting and either intermediate or long-acting forms prescribed to them for various reasons. The use of insulins is such that there are many different forms. Oral anti-diabetic drugs are given. Many of them there are many of them. The whole purpose is to control the production of extra sugar by the liver when it's not needed. And the idea is to find a way to slow down the disease. And there are many, many of those. Okay. Having said all that, I'd like to talk only briefly about again, food. Problems with the GI system obviously have some really major implications. One is the issue of too much acid in the stomach. Acid is one of the prime components of breaking down food. Too much acid can be reduced either using chemical or biological modification. Chemical modification are things like gums. We simply put in something that absorbs the acid. We want people not to be eating those like candy, because it's not good to have the acid completely removed from your stomach all the time. We have other biological agents that affect the biology of the secretion of acid. Proton pump inhibitors, and other kinds of drugs, like Prilosec is a proton pump inhibitor. The other thing that we've found is that some ulcers are an outgrowth. We used to think all ulcers were caused by stomach acid. We now know that there's a bacterium called Helicobacter pylori that is directly related to causing stomach ulcers. And most bacteria going into a stomach that has acid in it are killed. Helicobacter pylori, however, in order to survive, will secrete a little bit of ammonia to neutralize the acid in its immediate environment and protect itself. So then it attacks the stomach wall and causes ulcers. So we actually will use antibiotics now as part of a regimen for treating ulcers. The other kinds of conditions involve various forms of diarrhea. Acute infectious diarrhea mostly can be dealt with by just making sure you drink lots of water. The object is not to shut the diarrhea off. The reason you have it is because your colon is trying to kick stuff out that it doesn't like. We already know the body doesn't like new things that don't belong there. Diarrhea often is caused by either the presence of some organism or some toxin produced by an organism that has irritated the lining of the GI tract, and the body then secretes large amounts of water to flush it out. Well, we don't want to get dehydrated. People with diarrhea can become dehydrated. It kills millions of people around the world every year. That's one of the reasons that we have oral rehydration therapy that we used to treat indigenous diarrheas in parts of Africa and South America where it's a major issue. And we use this oral rehydration therapy because we are replacing the water and the electrolytes that they're losing while allowing their body to pick out the infectious material. There are chronic diarrheas that come from bowel diseases like Crohn's disease. The treatment is often very, very difficult for these because we don't have any drugs to treat them. What we have is some dietary changes that we ask people to experiment with, or we may try some drugs to try and reduce the motility through the intestine. There are many schools of thought on that. The other side of diarrhea is constipation. That's stuff not moving through the colon fast enough, or in some ways inhibiting our ability to allow things to move out of our colon. When we start building up a lot of material in our colon, the colon reacts by absorbing water out of it, making it harder. Constipation is basically hard feces. There's lots of things we have. We have lots of laxatives and stool softeners that people take. And then there's enemas can be used. In reality, my own personal cure, I've only experienced a constipation a few times in my life. And my own experience is that the best thing to treat it with is dried apricot. You eat, not just one or two, but eat a handful of dried apricots, and pretty soon you will not have that problem anymore. It does activate the two mechanisms. One puts a lot of pressure; it activates your peristalsis, but it also, since they're dried apricots, increases the ability of the body to put water into the colon and soften things up. Also, constipation should be looked at as something that is a hydration issue, and so you should hydrate. Okay, that's what I wanted to say about those topics. Take a look at the handouts. The information on them will be useful in doing your final. We have now about 20 minutes left in class. I'd like you to take the remaining class time to work on assignments that you haven't quite finished yet. And so did you tell about next one already? Okay, good.
It's gonna be the second week.
The second week, okay. That's all right. I don't know how many I'm gonna have. Pardon? No, it's her capstone class. Yeah, she is going to be taking basically two classes simultaneously, one with me and one with Elle. So we're trying to make sure that we can arrange that. So. Yep. She's getting real close. When do you go into externship, Maud, after this one? Do you go into externship, Maud, after this one, or do you still have another class? Okay, well, Christy can tell you. But you must be getting real close if you're taking both of those, capstone and professional development. Your capstone final is going to be your first or a certification exam. Do you know what you want to do? Yeah. But yeah, it'll be fun.